My arrogant son-in-law humiliated me at our Christmas dinner, sneering, "This holiday is only for winners, you old loser." Everyone froze in shock, but I just smiled calmly and replied, "Of course, real winners pay their own bills." Little did he know, that night I revoked his family's country club membership and yacht rental. They panicked and begged for mercy, but the consequences were just beginning. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Raymond Kilpatrick. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Sarasota, Florida, in the same two-story house on Pelican Bay Drive that I bought back in '89. I own 3 yacht marinas along the Gulf Coast, Sarasota, Bradenton, and Venice, under a company called Kilpatrick Marine Group. I built that business over 30 years, one dock at a time, one handshake at a time. These days I show up at the office twice a week, manage the rest from home, and spend my evenings in the garage workshop, shaping wood into something useful. I'm a quiet man, always have been. I wear flannel shirts, I drink my coffee black, and I don't talk unless I have something worth saying. Most people look at me and see a retired grandpa who got lucky with a couple of boats. That's fine. I've never needed anyone to know what I am. But my son-in-law, Tristan Foster, he made up his own version a long time ago. Tristan married my daughter Nicole 5 years back. He's 38, a good-looking, well-spoken, the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately checks if anyone noticed. He sells real estate for a mid-level firm in Sarasota. Nothing spectacular, but you'd never guess from the way he dresses. Italian shoes, fitted suits, a watch that costs more than most people's cars. He carries himself like a man who conquered the world before breakfast. The first year he was polite, even charming. He'd shake my hand, call me sir, bring a bottle of wine when he came to dinner. I remember thinking, maybe Nicole found a good one. Maybe I was wrong to worry. By the second year, the handshake stopped. He'd just nod when he saw me, a quick dip of the chin, the kind you give a waiter when you want the check. By the third year, the nods came with jokes. At a party at the Pelican Bay Club last spring, Tristan introduced me to a group of his friends as the Old Fisherman. Got a big laugh. I was standing right there. He didn't look at me when he said it. I smiled. That's what I do. I smile, and I file it away. There was a time last summer when Tristan was planning a route for the yacht, the Silver Wake, a 52-foot Hatteras that my company leases to the family at a fraction of the market rate, $800 a month instead of $7,200. I mentioned that the channel near Longboat Key gets shallow in August, that we should adjust the route south. Tristan waved his hand and said, loud enough for everyone on the dock to hear, "Dad, you don't understand yachts. I built 3 marinas. I've forgotten more about boats than he'll ever learn." But I smiled, filed it away. His mother, Julia Foster, is 64, a widow who lives in a rented apartment in Bayshore Gardens. She carries herself like old money, but there's no money, old or new. She comes to the Pelican Bay Club as a guest under the corporate membership that my company pays for. She sits at the bar, orders a glass of Prosecco, and tells anyone who will listen about her social circle. She looks at me the way you'd look at a stain on a tablecloth, something unfortunate that came with the furniture. And then there's Cody, Tristan's younger brother. 34, no steady job, no steady anything. He borrows money from Tristan regularly, which means he borrows it from me, since Tristan's lifestyle runs on a fuel line that traces straight back to my signature on half a dozen documents. Cody shows up every summer for the yacht trip, drinks my beer, eats my food, and tells jokes about the old man's fishing shack, meaning my house where he sleeps for free in my guest room. Here's what none of them ever thought to ask, not once in 5 years. Why does the club director, Brian Hoffman, walk across the room to shake my hand every time I visit? Why do I stroll past the front desk without swiping a membership card? Why does the lease on a 52-foot Hatteras cost this family $800 a month when the going rate on the open market is 9 times that? They never asked, because they never looked past the flannel shirt. One afternoon in November, I was sitting at my desk at home when the mail arrived. Among the bills and catalogs was an invitation on heavy cream-colored cardstock, the Pelican Bay Club's annual corporate dinner. They were asking me to speak as an honorary founding member. I held the invitation for a moment, turning it over in my hands. Then I looked up at the bookshelf across the room, where a framed photo from last summer sat between 2 volumes of maritime law. In the photo, Tristan stands on the bow of the Silver Wake, champagne glass raised, grinning wide, the Gulf of Mexico sparkling behind him. He looks like a man who owns the world. I slid the invitation into the top drawer of my desk, closed it, walked to the garage, picked up a hand plane, and started working on a piece of red oak I'd been saving. The wood shavings curled and fell to the floor in long, thin spirals. My phone rang around 8 that evening. Nicole. Hi, Dad. How are you? Fine, sweetheart. Just in the shop. Listen, Tristan was thinking for Christmas maybe everyone could come to your place. He says your house is the biggest, plenty of room. He wants to invite a few of his friends too, maybe some business contacts. Would that be okay? I set down the hand plane. Looked at the oak board, its grain still rough in places, not yet smoothed. Sure, I said. That'd be fine. Great, he'll be so happy. I'll start putting together a guest list. You do that, I said. I'll put together one of my own. She laughed, a small, nervous laugh, the kind she gives when she's not sure if I'm joking. Okay, Dad. Love you. Love you too, Nick. I hung up, picked the plane back up, ran it slow and steady along the grain. A guest list. Yes, that sounded about right. The morning after Nicole's call, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee and a legal pad. I wrote down 3 items. Not guests, not gifts. 3 documents that had been sitting in various filing cabinets for years, doing nothing, meaning nothing, until now. Item 1. The corporate membership agreement with the Pelican Bay Club. Kilpatrick Marine Group holds a founding membership, $18,000 a year, with usage rights extended to associated family members, at the discretion of the account holder. That's me. I added Tristan and his family to the access list 3 years ago, as a wedding gift I never mentioned out loud. Item 2. The lease agreement on the Silver Wake. A 52-foot Hatteras, owned through the company, leased to Tristan at a family rate of $800 per month. Market value, $7,200. The contract has a clause I wrote myself. The discounted rate is at the sole discretion of the lessor and can be revoked with 30 days written notice. Item 3. A promissory note for $14,000. 3 years ago, Tristan asked Nicole to ask me for a loan. For car repairs, he said. I wrote the check. He never brought it up again. Neither did I, but I kept the signed note. I stared at the list, took a sip of coffee. Then I picked up the phone and called Leonard Wade. Leonard has been my corporate attorney for 12 years. Dry as dust, precise as a Swiss watch, and completely uninterested in small talk. When his secretary put me through, he answered the way he always does. Raymond, what do you need? I need you to pull 3 files, I said, and read him the list. I'll have them ready by Thursday. I remember a day, must have been 7 or 8 years ago, before Tristan, before any of this. Nicole was 28, just finished her accounting degree, and she drove down from Tampa to spend the weekend. We sat on the back porch, the one that looks out over the canal, eating stone crab claws and drinking sweet tea. She told me about a guy she'd been seeing, some junior associate at a law firm. He's nice, Dad, but boring, she said, laughing. I want someone with a little fire. I told her, Fire's good, Nick. Just make sure it warms the house and doesn't burn it down. She rolled her eyes. You and your metaphors. But she remembered. I know she did, because 2 years later, when she brought Tristan home for the first time, she whispered to me in the kitchen, This one's got fire, Dad. And he did. He shook my hand firm, looked me in the eye, asked me about the marina business with what seemed like genuine interest. He laughed at my jokes. He complimented the woodwork on the staircase banister, the one I'd carved myself, a pattern of pelicans in flight. Did you make this? He asked, running his hand along the rail. I did. That's incredible, sir. Real craftsmanship. Sir, he called me Sir. The last time Tristan commented on anything I built was 3 Christmases ago. I'd made Nicole a jewelry box, hand-carved walnut with dovetail joints and a cedar lining. Took me 2 months. When she opened it, her eyes went wide. Dad, it's beautiful. Tristan glanced at it, turned it over once, and set it on the side table. Nice little hobby project, he said, already reaching for his phone. Nice little hobby project. Thursday came. I drove downtown to Leonard Wade's office on South Washington Boulevard. 5th floor, Suite 512. The same office he's kept since I hired him. The desk was covered in neat stacks of paper. Leonard doesn't believe in clutter, but he believes in thoroughness. Here's where you stand, he said, laying 3 folders in front of me. The club membership is corporate. You control access entirely. You can add or remove associated members at will. No appeal, no waiting period beyond standard processing. He opened the 2nd folder. The yacht lease. The discounted rate clause is airtight, at the sole discretion of the lessor. You can revoke it with 30 days written notice and revert to market rate, or terminate the lease entirely. 3rd folder. The promissory note. $14,000 signed by Tristan Foster, dated 3 years ago. No payments made. Under Florida law, you're entitled to statutory interest. That's 5% per annum. Total owed, approximately $16,100. I looked at the 3 folders. 3 quiet documents that held up an entire lifestyle. Club dinners, yacht weekends, the whole glittering stage on which Tristan Foster performed his role as a self-made man. Can you draft the notices? I asked. Termination of the yacht lease. Removal of associated family members from the club membership. And a formal demand letter for the outstanding loan. I'll have them ready in a week. Make it 5 days. Leonard paused, which for him counts as visible surprise. Planning something specific, Raymond. Christmas dinner, I said. I'm hosting. A week later, I sat in my workshop holding an envelope from Leonard's office. 3 documents inside, each one typed, referenced, and ready for my signature. I hadn't signed them. I set the envelope in the top drawer of my desk, the same drawer where the club invitation still sat, unanswered. I picked up a chisel and went back to the oak board. It was coming along nicely, the beginning of what would be a serving tray, something useful, something real. I wasn't in a rush. Tristan would make the next move himself. He always did. He couldn't help it. The same confidence that made him stand on someone else's yacht and raise a glass to his own success would eventually push him one step too far. All I had to do was wait, and I've always been good at waiting. The document sat in the drawer, unsigned, but ready, like me. A week before Christmas, my house stopped being mine. It happened gradually, the way termites work. By the time you notice the damage, the structure is already hollowed out. First came the caterer. Nicole hired a woman named Marla to handle the dinner, which was fine. But the morning Marla arrived to do a walkthrough of the kitchen, Tristan was already there, leaning against my counter with a cup of espresso, telling her what to prepare. We'll need a full prime rib, dry-aged at least 21 days, he said, not looking up from his phone. And none of that frozen shrimp. Fresh Gulf shrimp, butterflied. 2 appetizer courses before the main. Oh, and a cheese board. Imported only. Nothing domestic. Marla glanced at me. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if to ask, is this your event or his? I gave her a small nod. Let him talk. By that afternoon, Tristan had rearranged the living room furniture. My reading chair, the leather one I've had for 15 years, positioned by the window where the morning light hits just right, was shoved into the corner to make room for better flow. He pushed the dining table against the far wall and brought in 2 folding tables from somewhere, covering them with rented tablecloths. He hung garland I didn't buy over a mantelpiece I built with my own hands. I stood in the doorway and watched him work. He moved through my house like a stage director preparing for opening night, adjusting, commanding, never once asking permission. Tristan, I said from the doorway. He didn't turn around. Yeah? How many people are coming? 14, maybe 15. I invited the Burks. Greg Burke's a developer, good connection, and Marcus DeLeon from the firm. Oh, and Mom's coming, obviously. He paused, straightened a centerpiece. Nicole's handling the rest? Obviously. Julia Foster was coming. Of course she was. The woman who once told Nicole, within earshot of me, that her father lacked ambition. Julia, who wears pearls to a Sunday brunch she doesn't pay for, and speaks about the Pelican Bay Club as if she founded it herself. I said nothing. Went back to the kitchen. Poured another coffee. 2 days before Christmas, Cody Foster arrived. He pulled into my driveway in a car that needed new brakes. I could hear the metal grinding from inside the house, and walked in without knocking. He dropped a duffel bag in the guest room, left his shoes in the hallway, and by evening had already eaten through half the food Marla had prepped for the dinner. I found him in the living room that night, sprawled across my couch with a beer, watching something loud on the television. He looked up when I walked in. "Hey, Ray, great setup. Tristan really knows how to throw a party, huh?" "He sure does," I said, "especially when someone else is paying for it." Cody blinked, then laughed. "Oh, good one, old man," I smiled, filed it away. That evening, after the house had quieted down, I went to my study and made a phone call. Not to Leonard Wade. That business was already done. This call was to Brian Hoffman, the membership director at the Pelican Bay Club. Brian picked up on the second ring. "Raymond, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Brian, I'm hosting a Christmas dinner at the house. I'd like you to come, as my personal guest." A pause. Brian and I go back to the early days of the club. I was one of the founding members, and he'd joined the staff a decade later, working his way up. He knew me. He knew what I'd built, and he knew exactly whose names sat on my corporate membership account. "That's very kind, Raymond. I'd be honored." "Good. Dinner's at 7. Bring your wife, if she's free." "She's visiting her sister in Tampa, but I'll be there. Thank you." I hung up. Then I opened the desk drawer and took out the envelope from Leonard Wade's office. 3 documents: termination of the yacht lease, removal of associated family members from the club membership, formal demand for the outstanding loan of $16,100. I read each one carefully. Then I signed them. All 3. Folded them into separate envelopes, sealed them, and slipped them into the inside pocket of my navy blazer, the one hanging on the coat rack by the front door. The blazer hung there all night, 3 inches from where Tristan walked past on his way to bed. Later, it must have been close to midnight, I heard voices from the living room. I'd been in the workshop, finishing the oak serving tray, and I stepped into the hallway to get a glass of water. Through the half-open door, I could see Tristan standing with a drink in his hand, talking to Cody and 2 other guests who'd arrived early. "Tomorrow's going to be great," Tristan said, loud and loose. "We'll do the whole thing here. The old man doesn't mind. He barely knows what's going on half the time anyway." He laughed, and Cody laughed with him. I stood in the hallway for a long moment. The oak tray was still in my hands, smooth and warm from sanding. I looked down at it, ran my thumb along the grain. Then I turned, walked back to the workshop, and set it on the bench. I picked up the handplane, started a fresh pass on a new board, slow, steady, the blade whispering against the wood. In the coat closet, 3 sealed envelopes waited in the pocket of a navy blazer. Tomorrow was Christmas. Christmas morning broke clear and warm, typical for Sarasota, where the holidays arrive without snow or frost, just a pale blue sky and a gulf breeze that smells like salt and jasmine. By noon, the house was full. 14 guests, just as Tristan had promised. His business contacts: Julia in a silk blouse and her best pearls, Cody already working on his second drink, Nicole moving quietly between the kitchen and the dining room, making sure everything ran smoothly. I watched it all from the edge of the room. I'd put on a clean flannel shirt, dark green, Nicole's favorite, and the navy blazer, the one with the envelopes. Tristan was in his element. He worked the room like a campaign event, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, steering conversations. He'd positioned himself at the head of the table, my table, in my house, and no one questioned it. When he raised his glass for the first toast, the room quieted immediately. "To family," he said, smiling wide. "To success. To the people who make it happen." Everyone drank. Julia beamed. Nicole smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Brian Hoffman sat 3 chairs to my left. He'd arrived exactly at 7, wearing a quiet sport coat and a polite expression. He shook Tristan's hand when introduced, said very little, and observed everything. I caught his eye once during the first course. He gave me a small, barely perceptible nod. He understood he was here for a reason. He just didn't know the specifics yet. The meal was excellent. Marla had outdone herself. The prime rib was perfect. The shrimp was fresh, and even the cheese board met Tristan's imported-only standards. The wine flowed. Conversations overlapped. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. I ate slowly, listened, waited. It happened after the main course, somewhere between the third and fourth glass of wine. Tristan was telling a story about a real estate deal, something about a waterfront property he'd closed, making it sound like he'd single-handedly negotiated a ceasefire between warring nations. His audience was polite, but fading. He needed a bigger moment, a punchline. He found one. He turned in his chair, gestured toward me with his wineglass, and said it loud enough for every person at the table to hear. "You know what? This party, this whole night, it's for winners. People who go out and make things happen." He paused, let the words hang, then pointed directly at me. "And you, old man, you're just here to watch what success looks like." The table went silent. Not gradually, instantly the way sound disappears when you plunge underwater. 14 pairs of eyes shifted between Tristan and me. Someone at the far end let out a short, nervous laugh that died immediately. Nicole went pale. Her hand froze around her fork. Julia, sitting next to her son, pressed her lips together in something that could have been disapproval, but looked, to anyone paying attention, very much like a thin smile of satisfaction. Cody grinned into his glass. I set my fork down. Slowly. The clink of metal against porcelain was the only sound in the room. I looked at Tristan. He was still smiling. That broad, confident smile he wore like armor. He thought he was untouchable. He thought this was just another joke, another ribbing of the old man in the flannel shirt who didn't fight back. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then I spoke. Quietly, calmly, the way I'd say something about the weather. "Of course. Real winners pay their own bills." The silence deepened. Tristan's smile stayed in place, but something shifted behind his eyes. A flicker, brief and uncertain, like a candle flame caught by a draft. He laughed. It came out loud and forced. "Classic Ray," he said, turning back to the table. "Always with the one-liners." A few people chuckled, relieved. The conversation began to creep back, but I was already standing. I excused myself from the table, walked to the coat closet by the front door, and reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. 3 envelopes, white, sealed, each one addressed in Leonard Wade's precise handwriting. I carried them back to the living room and placed them on the mantelpiece, the one I'd built myself 20 years ago from reclaimed cypress wood, and set them upright, leaning against the wall where anyone could see them. Then I walked back to the table, sat down, and picked up my fork. "Anyone want more wine?" I said. Tristan noticed the envelopes. I saw his eyes track to the mantelpiece and stay there for a moment. 3 white rectangles, standing where there had been nothing before. His brow creased slightly, but the table was talking again. Someone was passing the bread, and he let it go. For now. Nicole looked at me. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen in a long time. Not worry exactly, but attention, as if she'd just realized I was in the room. Really in the room, not just sitting in my usual corner being quietly ignored. I gave her a small smile and took a bite of prime rib. At the far end of the table, Brian Hoffman set down his wineglass. He'd been watching the whole scene without saying a word. Now his eyes moved from the envelopes to me and stayed there. Brian knew what a corporate membership termination letter looked like. He'd processed hundreds of them. He knew the weight of a legal envelope, the feel of a formal notice, and he knew, better than anyone at that table, whose signature sat at the bottom of the Kilpatrick Marine Group's founding membership agreement. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He picked his glass back up, took a slow sip, and turned to the guest beside him with a quiet comment about the weather. But I saw it, that look. The look of a man who has just watched the first domino tip and knows exactly how many are lined up behind it. Christmas dinner continued. Tristan laughed and talked and poured more wine. The envelope sat on the mantelpiece, white and patient, waiting for morning. And I finished my meal in silence, thinking about something my father told me when I was 12 years old, back when I was learning to work wood for the first time. "Don't rush the cut, Raymond. The grain will tell you where to go. You just have to be patient enough to listen." I'd been listening for 5 years. Now the grain was ready. The guests left that night in waves. First the business contacts, then the couples, then Julia and Cody, who lingered until the wine bottles were empty. Nicole and Tristan stayed in the guest room. By the time the house went quiet, the envelopes on the mantelpiece had become invisible. Just part of the scenery, lost among the garland and the candle holders and the leftover holiday clutter. I went to bed at 11. Slept well. The kind of sleep that comes when a decision has been made and there's nothing left to deliberate. The next morning I was up before 6, made my coffee, took it to the workshop, and started applying the first coat of tung oil to the oak serving tray. The wood drank it in, the grain darkening and deepening, patterns emerging that hadn't been visible before. I worked slowly, methodically, the way I always do. The house was silent above me. Around 9 I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. Tristan's walk. He always came downstairs like he was making an entrance, each step a small announcement of his presence. I stayed in the workshop, kept oiling the tray. 20 minutes passed. Then I heard the front door of the workshop swing open, and Tristan was standing in the doorway. He was still in the clothes he'd slept in, a wrinkled dress shirt, untucked, sleeves rolled unevenly. His hair was uncombed. In his right hand he held all 3 envelopes, torn open, the letters unfolded and crumpled where he'd gripped them too hard. "What is this?" His voice was tight, controlled, but barely. The veins in his neck stood out like cords. I didn't look up from the tray. "Good morning, Tristan." "Don't give me good morning. What are these?" He held up the letters, shaking them. "You're pulling the club membership. You're canceling the yacht. And this demand letter from your lawyer for $16,000. Are you out of your mind?" I set down the oiling rag, folded it neatly, and placed it on the edge of the workbench. Then I looked at him. His face was flushed, a deep, uneven red that spread from his collar to his forehead. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. But his eyes? That's where the real story was. Behind the anger, behind the performance of outrage, there was something else. Something I'd never seen in Tristan Foster before. Fear. "Those documents are self-explanatory," I said. "The membership revocation takes effect in 30 days. The yacht lease reverts to market rate, $7,200 a month, or you return the vessel by the 1st of February. And the loan, which you signed for 3 years ago and never repaid, is now $16,100, including statutory interest under Florida law. You have 30 days. You can't do this." "I already did." This is retaliation. Because of what I said at dinner? It was a joke, Raymond. A joke. I picked the rag back up, started working on a stubborn patch near the edge of the tray where the oil wasn't absorbing evenly. "Tristan, you've been making that same joke for 5 years. Different words, same meaning. I have heard every version." I paused, pressed the oil into the grain. "But you're right about one thing. Last night was the last time." His face contorted. The flush deepened. He took a step into the workshop, and for a moment I thought he might actually raise his voice loud enough to wake Nicole. But he didn't. Instead, he lowered it, which for Tristan was far more dangerous. "I'll destroy your reputation," he said, leaning forward. "I'll tell everyone in Sarasota what kind of man you are. I'll expose you." I looked at him over the rim of my reading glasses. "Expose me as what, exactly? The man who funded your lifestyle for 5 years? Go ahead, Tristan. Tell everyone." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "The door's open, Tristan," I said, and went back to the tray. He stood there for a long time. 10 seconds, maybe 15, which feels like an eternity when you're watching a man realize that his threats have no teeth. Then he turned and walked out. The workshop door banged shut behind him. I listened to his footsteps cross the driveway. Then through the small window above my workbench, I watched him stop next to his car, pull out his phone and make a call. He paced back and forth on the concrete, talking fast, gesturing with his free hand. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The body language told me everything. He was looking for backup, an ally, a way to fight back. I wiped my hands on a clean cloth and took a sip of coffee. It had gone cold, but that was fine. Cold coffee never bothered me. Tristan finished his call, got in his car, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. Nicole appeared in the kitchen doorway a few minutes later, still in her robe, holding a cup of tea. "Dad? What happened?" Tristan just left. He looked furious. He found his mail, I said. She stared at me. I could see the questions forming behind her eyes, dozens of them stacking up like cards. But she didn't ask, not yet. She just stood there, holding her tea, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked at me the way she used to when she was a girl, as if I might actually know something she didn't. "Is everything going to be okay?" she asked quietly. "It will be," I said. "One way or another." She nodded slowly. Then she went back inside. I turned back to the serving tray and ran my hand across the surface. Smooth, warm, ready. Through the window, the driveway was empty, but somewhere across town, Tristan Foster was making phone calls, burning through contacts, scrambling for leverage he didn't have. The clock had started. 30 days. 3 weeks passed. Quiet weeks, on my end. I went to the marina office, played my monthly poker game with the guys from the boatyard, finished the oak serving tray, and started on a new project, a set of bookends from a piece of cherry wood I'd been saving. But beneath the routine, I kept my phone close and my attention closer. Tristan, by contrast, was not quiet at all. The first move came within a week. He hired an attorney. Not a great one, from what Leonard Wade told me, but an aggressive one. The lawyer sent a letter to Kilpatrick Marine Group, claiming that the discounted yacht lease represented a verbal permanent arrangement, and that revoking it constituted breach of an implied contract. Leonard read the letter over the phone to me, pausing twice to let out a dry, papery sound that I'd learned over 12 years was his version of laughter. "There's no implied contract," Leonard said. "The lease agreement is written. The discount clause explicitly states, at the sole discretion of the lessor. His attorney either hasn't read the document or is hoping we haven't." "Send a copy of the signed lease with the relevant clause highlighted," I said. "Nothing more." "With pleasure." The second move was through Nicole. Tristan sent her to me, or rather pressured her until she came on her own. She showed up at the house on a Saturday afternoon, eyes red, voice careful. "Dad, maybe you went a little too far?" I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. I set the knife down and looked at my daughter. "Nicole, in 68 years, I have never once gone too far. Not in business, not in life, not with anyone. Ask your husband what he said at my table, in my house, in front of 14 people." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands twisted the strap of her purse. "He says it was just a joke." "Does it feel like a joke to you?" She didn't answer. She stood in my kitchen for another minute, then said she needed to go and left. I watched her car pull away and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, but a quiet ache in my chest. This was the part I'd known would be hardest. Nicole was caught in the middle, and I couldn't spare her that. But I also couldn't keep absorbing blows from a man who believed he could insult me in my own house and face no consequences. The third move was the most interesting. Tristan started asking around Sarasota about me, about my business, my finances, my actual position. He was trying to figure out if I was bluffing, if the documents were real, if the old man in the flannel shirt had any real power behind the paperwork. He hit a wall. Deborah Nash, my office manager at the main marina, called me one afternoon. "Raymond, I got a strange call today. Someone from a real estate firm, a colleague of your son-in-law's, asking questions about Kilpatrick Marine Group's revenue and assets." I told him nothing, of course. "Good. Thank you, Deborah. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Just a family matter." The people Tristan asked, marina operators, club members, old business contacts, all gave him the same polite non-answer. "Raymond Kilpatrick? Sure, good businessman. Solid guy." Nobody gave him details because nobody knew details. I've always kept my finances private. Not out of secrecy, out of principle. Money talks, but it doesn't need to shout. Then came the news that shifted everything. Tristan's attorney reviewed the full lease agreement and delivered his verdict. The discount was clearly documented as discretionary, with no guaranteed term. Tristan's legal position was, in the lawyer's careful phrasing, not strong. From what Nicole later told me, the attorney recommended settling quickly and quietly rather than litigating. But the real blow came from a different direction entirely. Tristan had been a regular at the Pelican Bay Club for 3 years, attending events, networking at the bar, bringing clients to Sunday brunch. He knew the staff by name. He tipped well, talked loud, shook every hand in the room. He believed his place there was earned, a natural extension of his charm and social skill. What he never knew, what he never thought to ask, was how he got there in the first place. Sometime in the third week, someone told him, I don't know who, maybe one of the club staff, maybe a member who'd heard the story, but word reached Tristan that the membership he'd been using at the Pelican Bay Club wasn't just corporate. It was a founding membership, one of the original accounts from when the club was established, and the name on that account wasn't Tristan Foster. It was Raymond Arthur Kilpatrick. The man he'd called a loser at his own dinner table was one of the people who built the club where Tristan had been performing his role as a self-made success for 3 years. I heard about his reaction secondhand, through Nicole. She called that evening, her voice careful and flat, the way people sound when they're trying not to reveal what they're feeling. Dad, Tristan found out about the club, about you being a founder. I see. He's not taking it well. He didn't come home for dinner. He's been sitting in his car in the driveway for an hour. I said nothing for a moment. I could picture it perfectly. Tristan Foster, the man who always had the right answer, the right joke, the right angle, sitting alone in a parked car, staring through the windshield at a reality he'd spent 5 years refusing to see. Let him sit, I said quietly. Sometimes a man needs to be still before he can think straight. Nicole paused. Dad, what happens next? That depends on him. I hung up, walked to the workshop, picked up the cherry wood and turned it in my hands, studying the grain. 30 days were almost up, and the ground beneath Tristan Foster's expensive shoes was getting softer by the hour. The 30 days expired on a Sunday. I know this because Brian Hoffman called me that afternoon. Raymond, I thought you'd want to hear this directly. I was in the workshop, halfway through shaping the cherry bookends. I set down the chisel and wiped my hands. Go ahead, Brian. Your son-in-law and his mother showed up for the regular Sunday brunch about an hour ago. They walked up to the front desk, swiped their membership cards, and the system rejected them. I said nothing. Let him continue. The front desk associate, a young woman named Keeley, she handled it well. Very professional. She told them the corporate membership for Kilpatrick Marine Group no longer included their names. Mr. Foster demanded to speak with me. And I came out and confirmed it. I told him the changes were submitted by the account holder in accordance with the membership agreement, and that the decision is final and not subject to appeal. Standard procedure, nothing personal. How did he take it? Brian paused. Not well. He raised his voice, said this was unacceptable, that he'd been a member for 3 years, that he had relationships here, business contacts. His mother, Mrs. Julia Foster. She didn't say much. She turned red and kept looking at the floor. There were about a dozen people in the lobby at the time. I could picture it. Tristan standing at the polished reception desk of the Pelican Bay Club, dressed for brunch in his best sport coat, his card rejected like an expired coupon at a grocery store. The lobby full of the very people he'd spent 3 years impressing, watching his face change color as the reality caught up to the performance. And Julia, poor Julia, whose entire social identity was constructed on Prosecco-fueled afternoons in a club lounge she never paid a dime to enter. Standing behind her son with her pearls and her silence, watching the stage curtain fall. Thank you, Brian, I said. I appreciate you letting me know. Of course. Take care, Raymond. I hung up and went back to the bookends. The yacht situation resolved itself the following week. The deadline to either pay the market rate of $7,200 a month or return the silver wake came and went. Tristan couldn't pay. I knew he couldn't, which is why I'd given him the option in the first place. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is offer someone a choice that exposes the truth. He contacted Deborah Nash at the marina office and formally declined the lease. Deborah processed the return paperwork and called me to confirm. The silver wake is back under company control, she said. He wasn't happy about it, but he signed the release. Good. List her for commercial charter. Market rate. Already drafted the listing. I'll have it posted by end of day. That was Deborah. Always 2 steps ahead. I'd hired her 15 years ago, and she ran the office like a Swiss clock. She never asked questions about why I was doing this. She just made sure it got done right. The fallout between Tristan and his brother Cody came next, and I heard about it from Nicole. Cody, whose only reliable source of summer recreation was the annual yacht trip, found out there would be no yacht this year, no silver wake, no Gulf cruises, no cooler full of free beer on a 52-foot deck. He called Tristan, and, according to Nicole, the conversation escalated quickly. They screamed at each other for 20 minutes, Nicole told me on the phone. Her voice was tired. Cody said Tristan ruined everything. Tristan said Cody was a parasite. Then Cody hung up and Tristan threw his phone at the wall. I listened, didn't comment on the irony of one man who lived off another man's money, calling a third man a parasite. Some observations are better kept to yourself. Dad? Nicole's voice broke slightly. I need to tell you something. Go ahead, Nick. He lied to me about a lot of things. She was crying now, quietly the way she cried when she was a child, and didn't want anyone to know. I didn't know about the club membership. I thought he paid for it. He told me it was a business expense from his firm. I didn't know about the yacht discount either. He said the lease was a deal he negotiated himself. I closed my eyes. And the loan, Dad, the $14,000. He told me it was a gift, that you gave it to him because you wanted to help. He never mentioned he signed a promissory note. I sat down on the workshop stool. The cherry wood was in my lap, half-shaped, still rough in places. Nicole, I said carefully, none of this changes what I did, and none of it changes what he did. But what happens next is up to you. A long pause, then very quietly. I want to talk, just you and me. Not about Tristan, about everything. Whenever you're ready, I said, I'll be here. She hung up. I sat in the workshop for a long time, holding the cherry wood, running my thumb along the grain. My daughter had just called me, not as Tristan's messenger, not as a go-between, but as herself. For the first time in 5 years, she was asking her own questions. That, more than anything else, told me the tide had turned. We met at a small cafe on Main Street, one of those quiet places with tile floors and mismatched chairs where nobody cares who you are or how you're dressed. Nicole was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window, with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. She looked older than 36, not in a bad way, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time, and only just realizing the weight. I ordered a black coffee and sat down across from her. Thanks for coming, Dad. You don't have to thank me for having coffee with my daughter. She almost smiled. Then the dam broke. It came out in pieces, not all at once, the way truth usually works when someone's been avoiding it for years. Tristan's income wasn't what he'd claimed. His commissions were inconsistent, his base salary modest. The beautiful life they'd been living, the dinners, the trips, the clothes, the impression of effortless success, was built on a foundation of credit cards and quiet subsidies. We owe $67,000 across 3 cards, she said, staring at her cup. I found the statements last week. He kept them in a locked drawer in his office at home. I never looked before because he told me he handled the finances. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't say the words that every parent wants to say and knows they shouldn't. The club membership, she continued. He told me it was through his firm, a corporate perk for top salespeople. I had no reason to question it. He went to the club every Sunday. He knew everyone by name. He acted like he belonged there. She paused. I suppose he thought he did. People often confuse access with ownership, I said. She looked at me. The yacht, too. He said he found a deal through a friend of a friend. $800 a month for a 52-foot Hatteras. I should have known that was impossible. But I didn't know what yachts cost. I never asked. And the loan? Her eyes dropped. He told me it was a gift from you. A wedding present, just delayed. He said you insisted on giving it to him for the car because you wanted to help. Her voice cracked. I believed him, Dad. I'm sorry. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, just for a moment. Nicole, you don't owe me an apology. Not for this. Then who do I owe one to? Yourself, for not asking questions sooner. But that's your business, not mine. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, took a breath. What should I do? It was the question I'd been waiting for and dreading, because the honest answer wasn't simple, and I wasn't going to pretend it was. I can tell you what I'd recommend, not as your father, as someone who's made a living reading contracts and understanding what's real. Get a financial advisor, someone independent, not connected to Tristan or his firm. Have them look at everything, the debts, the income, the assets, the full picture, and get a family attorney, not a divorce attorney, not yet. A family attorney who can explain your rights and options under Florida law. She nodded slowly. Separate from Tristan's lawyer. Separate from everyone. This is for you. You're not telling me to leave him. I'm not telling you anything. I'm opening a door. You decide whether to walk through it. She sat with that for a while, turning her coffee cup in circles. Then she said something that surprised me. He's going to be furious when he finds out I met with you. Probably. He'll say you're manipulating me. Probably. Are you? I looked at my daughter. She was testing me, and she had every right to. She'd been lied to by one man for years. She needed to know she wasn't being steered by another. Nicole, I gave you a name and a recommendation. A financial advisor and a lawyer. If that's manipulation, then every phone book in America is a conspiracy. This time she did smile. Small, fragile, but real. We finished our coffee. She hugged me in the parking lot. The first real hug in longer than I wanted to count. Then she drove away, and I stood by my truck for a minute, watching her taillights disappear down Main Street. Tristan found out about our meeting within 2 days. Nicole told me later that he exploded, accused her of going behind his back, of siding with the old man, of trying to undermine their marriage. She'd heard it all before, the shouting, the blame, the pivot from offense to victimhood. But this time, something was different. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She didn't try to smooth it over. She just stood up from the kitchen table, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. He followed her, still talking. She didn't answer. It was a small act, barely a gesture. But it was the first time in 5 years that Nicole Kilpatrick, because that's still who she is underneath, chose silence over surrender. A week later, a letter arrived at my house, not from Nicole, from an attorney representing Tristan Foster. The letterhead was new, a different firm from the one that had tried to challenge the yacht lease. The letter stated that Tristan was pursuing a claim of emotional distress and reputational harm, resulting from the public and deliberate revocation of his club membership. The letter demanded compensation and threatened civil litigation. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and smiled. I picked up the phone and called Leonard Wade. Leonard, I just received something you're going to enjoy. Leonard Wade called me back 3 days later. He'd reviewed Tristan's claim in full and had prepared a response that, in his words, should bring this matter to a swift and permanent conclusion. We met at his office on South Washington Boulevard. He sat behind his desk with 3 documents arranged in a row, each one paper-clipped and annotated in his small, precise handwriting. Let's start with the membership claim, he said. Mr. Foster is alleging emotional distress and reputational harm, arising from the revocation of his access to the Pelican Bay Club. His argument rests on the premise that the revocation was punitive and public. And it fails on every count. The corporate membership agreement clearly designates the account holder, that's you, as having sole authority over associated access. Revocation requires no justification, no hearing, and no appeal. It's a private business arrangement, not a public right. His attorney should have known this before filing. He opened the second document. Now, here's where it gets interesting. On the evening of the Christmas dinner, you mentioned to me that you'd be recording the event. Under Florida law, specifically Section 934.03, Florida is a one-party consent state. You were present, you consented, and the recording is legally admissible. I nodded. I'd turned on the small digital recorder in my blazer pocket before sitting down to dinner. An old habit from years of business negotiations. Always document what matters. The recording captures Mr. Foster's remarks in full, Leonard continued, and I quote the relevant portion. This party is for winners, and you, old man, you're just here to watch what success looks like. Clear, loud, and directed at you in front of 14 witnesses. He closed the folder. Our response will include the full membership agreement demonstrating your legal authority, the audio recording demonstrating the provocation, and a formal notice that any continuation of this claim will be met with a counterclaim for recovery of the outstanding $16,100, plus legal fees. What's your prediction? His attorney will listen to the recording, advise his client that the claim is not only baseless, but potentially self-damaging, and recommend immediate withdrawal. How long? A week. Maybe less. Leonard was right. It took 5 days. Tristan's attorney sent a brief letter withdrawing the claim without prejudice, which in legal terms meant they were backing away as quietly as possible while trying to preserve the illusion that they could return. They wouldn't. We both knew it. I heard from Nicole during this period. She'd taken my advice and consulted with a family attorney, a woman named Patricia Torres, recommended by the financial advisor I'd suggested. Nicole didn't tell me the details of their conversations, and I didn't ask. That was her business. But something had shifted in her voice, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. She was asking questions now, not just absorbing answers. Tristan, meanwhile, was unraveling, slowly, visibly, the way a rope fries under tension. Without the club, he'd lost his primary networking venue, the Sunday brunches where he'd entertained clients, the cocktail events where he'd pressed flesh and closed deals, the entire social infrastructure that had made him look like a player in Sarasota's real estate world. All of it was gone. He tried attending other venues, other events, but he'd built his contacts through the Pelican Bay Club, and without that stage, his audience had scattered. Cody disappeared entirely. Nicole mentioned in passing that he'd found another arrangement, some acquaintance in Tampa who had a boat and loose boundaries. The parasite had found a new host. I felt nothing about it. Cody had never been the problem. He was just a symptom. Julia was a different story. Without the club, her social calendar collapsed. The lunches, the charity committee seats, the Prosecco afternoons, all of it had been accessed through my corporate membership. She'd never paid a cent, never held a card in her own name, never contributed anything except her presence and her opinions. Now she was back in her rented apartment in Bayshore Gardens, watching the world she'd borrowed recede like a tide. I heard she stopped answering calls from the women she'd socialized with at the club. Whether they stopped calling first or she stopped picking up, I didn't know. Either way, the silence was the same. Then, on a Tuesday evening in early spring, my doorbell rang. I was in the workshop. Where else? Finishing the cherry bookends. I set them down, wiped my hands, and walked to the front door. Tristan stood on my porch, alone. No attorney, no Nicole, no bravado. He was wearing a plain button-down shirt, untucked, and khaki pants that looked like they'd been pulled from the back of a closet. No Italian shoes, no expensive watch. I noticed it was gone, replaced by a simple digital band. He looked like a man who had run out of costumes. "Raymond," he said, "can we talk?" I studied him for a long moment. The flush was gone. The arrogance was gone. What remained was something raw and uncomfortable. The face of a man standing on the wrong side of a door he'd spent years kicking open without knocking. I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat in the living room, the same room where the Christmas table had stood, the same mantelpiece where I'd placed the 3 envelopes. The garland was long gone, the rented tablecloths returned, the folding tables collapsed and stored. The room was back to being mine. My furniture, my space, my reading chair returned to its spot by the window. Tristan sat on the couch. I took the chair across from him. Neither of us spoke for a full minute. He was gathering himself, building towards something. I could see it in the way he clasped and unclasped his hands, the way his jaw worked, as if rehearsing words he hadn't quite committed to. "I want to apologize," he said finally. I waited. "What I said at Christmas, at your table, in your house, it was wrong. I know that. I've known it since the moment you stood up from that chair." His voice was level, careful, controlled, but underneath the measured tone, I could hear the machinery of negotiation. Tristan Foster wasn't here to apologize. He was here to trade. "I appreciate that," I said. Nothing more. He shifted on the couch. "The thing is, Raymond, the club, it wasn't just social for me. It was business. Half my client relationships ran through Pelican Bay. Without that access, I've lost 3 listings in the past month. My pipeline is drying up. I understand. And the loan? The $16,000. I can't pay it right now. Not with the debt Nicole and I are carrying. If you could give me more time, or work out some kind of... Tristan. I said his name quietly, but firmly enough to stop him mid-sentence. He looked at me. I'm going to give you exactly what you've earned. Not more, not less. His eyes narrowed slightly. A flicker of the old wariness. He didn't know where this was going. The debt. $16,100. I'm going to forgive it. Relief washed across his face. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. But, I continued, there's a condition. You'll sign a formal acknowledgement of the loan, the full history, the original amount, the date it was issued, the fact that no payments were made, and the statutory interest that accrued. Leonard Wade has drafted the document. It states that the debt existed, that it was valid, and that it has been discharged in full by my decision. You sign it, it's over. Clean. His relief cooled. He understood this wasn't mercy. It was a receipt. A permanent record that the debt had been real, that he'd owed it, and that it was forgiven, not because he'd earned forgiveness, but because I'd chosen to close the book. And the club? He asked. The club membership stays as it is. The corporate account covers Kilpatrick Marine Group employees and my immediate family. You're welcome to apply for your own membership. Individual, full rate, $18,000 a year. He stared at me. The number hung in the air between us. The yacht? He said, though I could tell he already knew the answer. The Silver Wake is listed for commercial charter, market rate. If you'd like to lease her, Deborah can send you the terms. He sat very still. I watched the last traces of hope drain from his expression, not dramatically, not with rage or tears, but with the quiet, final acceptance of a man who has walked into a room expecting a second chance and found instead a mirror. Real winners pay their own bills, Tristan, I said, not cruelly, not with sarcasm. Just the truth, spoken plainly, the way I've always spoken it. He nodded once. Then he stood up, took the acknowledgement document from the coffee table where I'd placed it before he arrived, and signed it with my pen. His hand was steady. I'll give him that. He set the pen down, looked at me one more time, and said, Thank you, Raymond. Then he walked out. I sat in my chair and listened to his car pull away. The house was quiet. The canal glimmered through the back window, catching the late afternoon sun. A sound from the hallway. I turned. Nicole was standing in the doorway. She'd been there the whole time. I'd known she was coming. She'd told me that morning she wanted to be here, not to intervene, just to listen. She walked over and sat on the arm of the couch. We didn't speak. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, and we sat there together, watching the light move across the water. A month later, I stood on the deck of the Silver Wake. She was docked at the main marina in Sarasota, freshly cleaned and rigged for her first commercial charter. $7,200 a month, full market rate. Deborah had booked the first client within a week of listing. In my shirt pocket was a letter from Nicole. She'd written it by hand. Her handwriting, not a text, not an email, but actual ink on actual paper. She told me that she and Tristan had started counseling, that it was hard, that she didn't know if it would work, but she was going in with open eyes for the first time. She thanked me, not for the money, not for the club, not for the yacht. She thanked me for showing her the difference between what's real and what's performance. I folded the letter and slipped it back into my pocket, leaned against the railing and looked out at the Gulf. The water was calm, the way it gets on spring evenings when the wind dies down and the surface goes flat as glass. A pelican skimmed low across the surface, then banked and climbed. 5 months ago, a man sat at my table, called me a loser in front of 14 people, and smiled like he'd won something. Today, that same man signed a document acknowledging a debt I'd forgiven, and walked out of my living room without a club membership, without a yacht, and without the illusion that had carried him for 5 years. And I was standing on the deck of a boat that bore my company's name, in a marina I'd built from nothing, wearing a flannel shirt and drinking cold coffee. I smiled. For real this time. The kind of smile that comes when the grain lines up and the cut is clean, If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,